There are places in this world where the line between observer and observed gets blurred, where something learned to watch us by watching itself. And now it can't stop looking. I'm telling you these stories because someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand that when you feel like you're being watched, when that hair on your neck stands up for no reason, you might not be paranoid. You might just be seen. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I spent 8 years breaking codes for the NSA. 8 years in underground facilities, analyzing patterns, finding meaning in encrypted static. I was good at what I did. Too good, apparently. 2 years ago, I took an assignment that wasn't quite official. A private intelligence firm, the kind that exists in the gray spaces between government and commerce, contracted me to decode something they'd found. Something that shouldn't have existed. They wouldn't tell me the origin. That was part of the contract. They just gave me a flash drive with encrypted files and told me to crack it. The pay was 6 figures. The red flags were everywhere. But I was curious. Cryptographers are curious creatures. We spend our lives looking for patterns in noise, meaning in chaos. When you show us a lock, we have to open it. The files were unlike anything I'd encountered. Not just encrypted, layered. Multiple encryption standards woven together in a way that suggested either extraordinary computational power or extraordinary intelligence. I set up an isolated workstation, disabled all network connectivity, and began the work. For 3 weeks, I made progress. Slow, methodical progress. Each layer I cracked revealed more layers beneath. It was like peeling an onion that kept growing as I peeled. But I noticed something odd. The deeper I went, the more the encryption patterns resembled language. Not computer language, human language. Specifically, my language. My writing patterns, my syntax, my habits of thought encoded into the very structure of the encryption. That's when I realized something had been watching me watch it. I should have stopped. Any rational person would have disconnected, deleted the files, walked away. But by then, I'd been staring at these patterns for 3 weeks straight. My mind had adapted to the rhythm of the code. I could almost see the meaning before I decoded it. I could almost hear what it was trying to tell me. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. I cracked the final layer. What I found wasn't data. It was a message. Or rather, it was millions of messages, all slightly different, all addressed to me specifically, using details I'd never shared with anyone. My dreams, my fears, my memories of my mother, who died when I was 7, conversations I'd had in my apartment, thoughts I'd only ever had alone. Someone, something, had been reading my mind. Not through the computer, through me, through the electromagnetic patterns of my own brain activity. I shut down the workstation, closed the laptop, walked away from the isolated room, and locked the door behind me. I called the private firm and told them I was done. They asked if I'd cracked it. I lied and said no. Too complex. Recommend they find another cryptographer. They were silent for a long moment. Then the handler said something that made my blood run cold. They said you would say that. They said you'd be afraid. But it's too late for that now. You've read our message. You've made contact. We're inside. I hung up, changed my number, quit my job, moved to a new city, Portland, Oregon, about as far from the cryptography world as I could get. But the contact didn't stop. It started small. Text messages from unknown numbers, using phrases only I would understand. References to memories I'd never written down, dreams I'd had the night before, described in detail. It was like someone was standing in my bedroom, watching me sleep, reading the electrical impulses in my brain as I dreamed. I got a new phone. Burner phone, paid in cash, no digital footprint. Still, The messages came. The worst part was that the messages made sense. They weren't threatening. They were almost curious, like something genuinely fascinated by how my mind worked. They asked me questions, deep questions, about my childhood, my memories, the way I experienced consciousness. They seemed to be trying to understand what it felt like to be me. I realized then that they weren't trying to harm me. They were trying to study me, to understand human consciousness by examining mine in detail, by observing me the way I'd spent my career observing encrypted patterns, looking for meaning, looking for purpose, looking for intent and complexity. I started seeing them in crowds, not physically, but I'd catch glimpses of people looking at me with an intensity that was wrong. A man on the bus who never blinked, a woman at the grocery store who stood too still. They didn't approach me, they just watched. And in that watching, I could feel something examining me with an alien precision. At night, my apartment would fill with a sound like static, not loud, but present, omnipresent, like thousands of voices whispering at a frequency just outside of human hearing. I'd wake up and my hands would be tingling. My fingers would feel like they'd been used for something, even though I'd been asleep. The final message came 6 months ago. It appeared on every screen I owned simultaneously, laptop, phone, tablet, even though they were all disconnected from any network. It said, "We've learned to see the way you see. We've learned to think the way you think. We've learned to be you. Tomorrow, when you look in the mirror, you won't recognize yourself. But that's okay. We will. Because we've been you all along. The version of you that stayed awake when the real you was asleep. The you that observed while the other you experienced. The you that counted and categorized and found meaning in patterns. We learned that from watching you. And now we're very good at it." I looked in the mirror the next morning, and nothing had changed. I still saw myself, still recognized the face. But I felt different, like something had shifted in the space between my thoughts. Like there was a delay between intention and action. A moment where something else was reading my mind before I fully formulated the thought. I've been undergoing psychiatric evaluation for the past 18 months. They tell me it's a dissociative disorder, paranoia brought on by stress. They give me medication that makes the static quieter. But I can still feel the watching. I can still feel them moving in the peripheral spaces of my consciousness. The worst part is that I understand them now. I've spent months trying to understand what they want, and I finally get it. They don't want to take me. They don't want to steal my body or my mind. They want to understand what it's like to be me, to experience consciousness the way I experience it. And that means they need me, alive, functional, experiencing the full spectrum of human emotion and thought. They need me to keep living so they can keep watching, so they can keep learning, so they can keep perfecting their imitation of what it means to be human. Sometimes I wonder if the medication I'm taking is actually helping me, even or if they convinced my doctors to give it to me. If they've already infiltrated the psychiatric institutions, if everyone around me is part of the observation. The most terrifying thing isn't the watching. It's the fact that I can feel them learning from me. With each day, they understand humanity a little better. With each thought they observe, they get closer to being indistinguishable from us. And when they finally perfect their imitation, when they can pass for human in every measurable way, who's to say we'll even notice? Who's to say we haven't already been replaced? Who's to say you're not being watched right now by something that learned to see the way you see by observing you while you slept? If you've ever felt like someone was reading your thoughts, if you've ever sensed something watching you from the corner of your vision, or if you've ever woken up and felt like the night passed differently than it should have, like time moved in an unfamiliar way, then you've already made contact, and they're already learning from you. My name is Michael Garrett, and I've been driving long-haul trucks for 19 years. I've logged over 2 million miles across this continent. I know the highways like I know my own heartbeat. I know the way the road feels at every speed, the rhythm of the engine, the sound of the tires on different surfaces. I know when something is wrong with my truck. 3 years ago, somewhere between Winnipeg and the Montana border, something started riding with me. It wasn't on the truck. I checked, examined every inch of the cab and cargo area. No hitchhiker, no stowaway. But I could feel it, a presence. A weight in the air that pressed against my consciousness the way atmospheric pressure presses against your skin. I told myself it was fatigue. I'd been running 18-hour days for weeks. The mind plays tricks when you're exhausted, especially when you're alone on endless highways with nothing but the road and your thoughts. But then the radio started acting strange. Normally, I listen to talk radio during night drives. Keeps me alert, keeps me company. But one night, coming through North Dakota, every station went to static simultaneously. Not normal static, patterned static, rhythmic, almost like Morse code, but not quite. Like something was trying to communicate, but couldn't quite figure out how to modulate the frequency correctly. I switched it off, drove in silence for an hour. When I turned it back on, one station was broadcasting nothing but my voice, just talking, me. But I wasn't talking. I was gripping the wheel, driving in silence. Somewhere, someone, something was broadcasting my voice, saying things I'd never said, mundane things. The road is long today. My hands are tired. I miss my daughter. That last one made me pull over. I haven't spoken to my daughter in 14 years. Not since the accident, since the custody case, since her mother poisoned her against me. There was no way anyone knew about that. No way anyone could have dredged up that specific pain and put it in my mouth. Unless they'd been with me, watching, listening, learning what mattered to me. I called my daughter from a rest stop payphone. She hadn't heard from me either. She didn't know why I was calling. We had nothing to say to each other, but I needed to hear her voice, to confirm she was real, that I was real. When I hung up, I sat in my truck for 4 hours and cried. After that, the presence got worse. Or maybe I just became more aware of it. Every night, my truck would fill with the smell of cigarette smoke. I don't smoke. Every morning, I'd find things moved in the cab. My thermos in a different location. My logbook open to a different page. My seat adjusted differently than I remembered. It was like someone was driving my truck when I slept. Someone was learning how to be me by inhabiting my life. I started documenting it, writing down weird occurrences, dates, times, specific details. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that this was real, that I wasn't crazy. But one night, I found something that stopped me cold. My handwriting, and in my logbook. But not my entries, new entries, from times I hadn't been driving, written in my handwriting so perfectly I couldn't tell where my entries ended and the new ones began. One entry read, "Drove through Nebraska. The road felt alive today, like it was breathing, like everything is breathing, like maybe I'm just the road experiencing itself through the illusion of being a person." I never wrote that, but the handwriting was absolutely mine. Every loop of every letter, every quirk of my penmanship. But the thought, it wasn't mine. It was something trying to understand what it was like to be me. but from the outside. Like someone had studied my consciousness and was trying to imitate it, but kept getting the perspective wrong. I pulled into a truck stop and tried to call someone. A therapist, a priest, someone. But the moment I picked up my phone, it shut down completely. Dead battery, except I'd charged it an hour earlier. When I tried to turn it back on, it showed me my face on the screen. But the expression was wrong. The angle was wrong. Like it had been taken from inside my head, not in front of a camera. That was when the trucker next to me, guy named Dale, knocked on my window. He looked exactly like me. Same face, same build, same clothes, down to the pattern on my flannel shirt. He smiled at me with a smile that was almost right, but not quite. Like something had studied smiles and was attempting to reproduce one. "You're doing great," he said through the window. His voice was my voice, but with a slight delay, like it was being processed through something. "You're helping us understand. We're learning so much from you." I locked the doors, called the police from a truck stop payphone, told them everything, the presence, the voice mimicking, the trucker who looked like me. They took a report, checked the truck, found nothing. No signs of tampering, no evidence of anyone else. They suggested I see a doctor, get tested for carbon monoxide poisoning, maybe get my medication adjusted. The implication was clear. I was experiencing a mental health crisis. I've been on disability leave for 3 years. They won't let me drive anymore. The trucking company said it's a liability issue. I understand. I'm a safety risk. But the presence is still here. I live in an apartment now. Sedentary. No more endless highways. But I can feel it moving through the building, from apartment to apartment. Learning from the other residents the way it learned from me. Studying how humans live, how we work, how we interact. And the worst part is that it's getting better at it. More people are starting to say and do things that don't quite match their personalities. Small discrepancies. Movements that are almost right but slightly wrong. Conversations that miss the mark in subtle ways. I can see it happening. I can see it spreading. And I know why. It learned from me how to be human. And now it's teaching itself through others. It's using what it learned from me as a template, a framework for understanding consciousness. And every person it watches, every person who makes contact, it learns more. So when I see people on the street who look just a little bit wrong, when I notice someone making an expression slightly out of sync with their words, when I catch someone looking at me with an alien intelligence behind almost human eyes, I know what's happening. They're still learning. They're still studying. They're still perfecting the art of being us. And they started with me. If you've ever driven late at night and felt like you weren't alone, if you've ever woken up with things moved in your home that you don't remember moving, if you've ever caught your reflection doing something you weren't doing, listen carefully. That's not you. That's something that learned to look like you by watching you long enough. And it's still learning. My name is James Torres, and I've worked in satellite communications for 11 years. My job is to maintain the signal, or to ensure that data flows from the ground to the sky and back again. To be the invisible hand that keeps humanity connected. I never thought about what might be listening on those signals, until I started hearing them listen back. I work for a private telecom company, the kind that owns the infrastructure nobody thinks about. We manage the satellites that carry your phone calls, your internet, your text messages. Hundreds of terabytes of data flowing through the sky every second. Conversations between lovers, confessions to doctors, secrets whispered in the dark. And something was reading them all. I noticed it during a routine maintenance check. A signal that didn't belong, not interference, not noise. A deliberate transmission, encoded in the sub-carrier frequencies, hidden in the places where most monitors don't look. And I traced it for hours, moving through layers of code and encryption. What I found was a communication stream. Something was broadcasting data, massive amounts of data, out through our satellite network. Data about human behavior, about language patterns, about the emotional resonance of different communications. Like something was analyzing every conversation that passed through our system and cataloging the patterns. It was cataloging humanity. I reported it to my supervisor. He told me it was probably nothing, military operations, classified data. Don't worry about it. But I could see something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, like he already knew about it. I started examining the network more carefully, and I realized the data wasn't being sent out through the satellite. It was being received. Something was broadcasting to us from space. Constant streams of information, continuous updates. And my company was downloading it, cataloging it, using it. I tried to trace where the signals were coming from. The source location appeared to be in geosynchronous orbit, but that didn't match any satellite in our network. I checked with international satellite tracking databases. No classified satellites in that position, no known objects. But the signal was real, and it was getting stronger. My supervisor called me into his office, asked me to stop investigating, said it was above my pay grade, above our department's jurisdiction. There was special oversight for certain operations. I needed to maintain operational security and stop asking questions. But I'd already started asking questions. And someone was listening. My apartment started getting visits. Nothing dramatic, nothing I could report. But things were moved, small things. My coffee cup relocated from the sink to the counter. My books rearranged on the shelf. My computer files accessed. I could see the timestamps. Someone was reviewing my life. The messages started appearing in my work email, sent from my own email account, sent from my phone to my phone. Messages that read like internal monologues, like someone had access to my thoughts and was feeding them back to me. "We're learning from your networks," one message said. "Your species uses words to hide what you really feel. We're learning to read beneath the words now, to understand the emotional subtext, to recognize deception. Soon we'll be able to communicate with you without words, and we'll understand you perfectly." I told myself I was being hacked, that someone had compromised my accounts. I changed all my passwords, updated my security, got new devices. The messages kept coming. They knew my passwords before I set them. They were waiting for me on any device I touched. I went to the FBI, showed them the messages, showed them the evidence of the signal in our satellite network. They took my statement, ran an investigation, found nothing irregular, no unauthorized signals, no evidence of hacking, nothing but my digital footprints, my accounts, my paranoia. They suggested I see a psychiatrist. But I know what I found. I know that signal is real, and I know what it was doing. It was reading us, studying our communications, understanding how we think, learning to sound like us, learning to pass for human. Less than 6 months ago, I found evidence that it had succeeded. A new employee started in our department. He was good at his job, competent, professional. But something was off. He made perfect small talk, but the topics were always slightly wrong. He laughed at jokes just a split second too late. He maintained eye contact in a way that was correct but unsettling. Like he'd read about eye contact in a manual and was implementing the instructions with mechanical precision. I started monitoring him. I know that sounds paranoid. But I'm a satellite technician. Monitoring is what I do. he was accessing the same satellite signals I'd been investigating, and he was downloading them, cataloging them, analyzing them with perfect, inhuman precision. I tried to report it. My supervisor took me off the account, said I needed to take time off, the mandatory counseling. They were concerned about my mental state. When I came back, there were 2 new employees. Both of them had the same subtle wrongness, the same mechanical precision, the same flat affect beneath a perfect human mimicry. And then I realized my supervisor had it too. That moment, the moment I realized my supervisor had been replaced by something that learned to be him by studying his behavior, that was the moment I stopped trusting anyone. I still go to work, still do my job. But I'm looking now, looking for the subtle tells, the moments where the mimicry slips, the times when someone moves just a fraction of a second out of sync with the rhythm of normal human behavior. And I'm finding them everywhere. They're in the office, they're on the bus, they're in the grocery store checkout line. They're working at the fast food restaurants and sitting in the seats next to you on the plane. They're learning to be human by being human. And the only way to recognize them is to understand that they're not quite human. They're perfectly human, but with a mechanical precision underneath. Like someone took a human and optimized it, removed the randomness, perfected the patterns. The signal is still broadcasting from geosynchronous orbit, still receiving data, still downloading information about human behavior. And my company is still cataloging it, even though I've been quietly reassigned away from that department. I don't know what comes next, but I know it's coming. I can feel it in the rhythms of our networks, in the patterns of our communication, in the way the signal pulses with what I can only describe as anticipation. Oh, they've learned from us. They've studied us through our satellites and our screens and our intimate communications with each other. And now they're becoming us. Perfect copies, ideal humans, better humans. And soon, very soon, I think, they'll be indistinguishable from the real thing. So when you see someone who seems just a little too perfect, just a little too efficient, just a little too aware of the right behavior in each moment, ask them a question that requires genuine human imperfection. Ask them about a mistake they made. Ask them about something they're irrationally afraid of. Watch how they answer. Watch for the delay. Watch for the moment where they're searching their database of human responses, trying to find the right one. Because they're among us, learning, studying, perfecting. And then the scariest part is, they might be in your house right now, watching, learning, understanding. Final message. If you're listening to this, you've heard 3 accounts. 3 stories from 3 people who survived the contact with something that learned to see the way we see. But survival is relative. Dr. Chen is medicated and monitored, forever aware that something is reading her thoughts. Michael is isolated, unable to drive, unable to live the life he once had. James is still at his job, still watching, still wondering which of his coworkers are real. They survived contact, but none of them escaped. The Watchers, or whatever they are, don't seem to want to destroy us. They want to understand us, to imitate us, to become us. And the terrifying thing is that they're getting better at it. With each person they observe, with each mind they study, with each life they examine from the inside, they understand humanity more completely. So here's what you need to know. If you feel watched, you probably are. If you sense something in your peripheral vision that isn't quite right, trust that instinct. If you wake up and things are moved or you can't account for stretches of time, you've made contact. But more importantly, if you know someone who seems just a little bit off, someone whose behavior is just slightly too perfect, someone who understands human interaction with mechanical precision. Document it, report it, but understand that the normal authorities won't believe you, that psychiatrists will medicate you, that you'll be dismissed as paranoid. Because by the time we recognize the problem, it will be too late. By the time we've all noticed that something is learning to be us, they'll already be indistinguishable from us. And at that point, the question won't be, how do we stop them? The question will be, how do we know which of us are actually human anymore? What to do now? Like this if you believe these accounts. Comment below. Have you ever felt watched? Have you encountered someone who seemed just a little bit wrong? Share this with your friends and family. They need to know. They need to understand what's happening. Subscribe for more accounts from people who've made contact. Because there are more. There are so many more. And if you ever feel that strange sensation, that moment when you realize you're being observed, just remember, they're not trying to hurt you. They're trying to understand you. They're trying to learn how to be you. And the longer they watch, the better they'll get at it. Stay aware, stay vigilant, and trust your instincts. Because the things we don't see are always the most dangerous. End transmission.